Thank you for taking the time to watch my video. I really appreciate it. If you enjoyed this video, please click thumbs up, as that will help grow my channel. If you'd like to subscribe, I'd appreciate that as well. And if you have any questions, feel free to leave those and I will respond. Again, thank you. I'm going to do something this week that I don't normally do. But it's good for people that follow my channel that want to learn. I'm going to be turning between centers, and I'm going to be doing some spindle work. I say turning between centers. I'll start between centers. I'll quickly switch over to my chuck, and then, but it's still spindle work. So normally I'm turning a bowl. It's normally what you see on this channel. So this is going to be a leg for a piece of furniture, for a daybed for my daughter. So what I did was I glued up some 2x6. I glued up 3 of them to give me a 4x4 block, and then I'm going to turn that. You can turn softwood. You need sharp tools. People think softwood would be easier to turn. It's actually much harder because it doesn't give you a nice finish, but you can do it. And that's what I'm going to do here. My daughter wants to stain this anyways, and to match the rest of the wood, softwood just made sense. Plus, I didn't have a 4x4 block of hardwood. So I'm going to get this mounted up between centers. So I've marked center point on both ends. So on this end, I have what's called a drive spur. So you can see that there, and that just goes in, and that's what actually drives it. These 4 points here is what turns it. I'm just going to do that for a little bit, but I'm going to turn tenon on there to put it in my chuck, just because it's easier to turn. But I will say that for those that don't have a chuck, I could have done this whole project between centers the whole time. The only thing I do find is sometimes when you're turning between centers, it will spin. So you do have to keep tightening it up, because those 4 crosses there will start to spin and your work will spin freely. So I do prefer to have it in the chuck. You lose a little bit of length when you do that, but my project's long enough that I'm fine there. So let's go ahead and get this mounted up. So here I am mounted between centers again. So you'll see I've got a live center on this end. It spins, it's on a ball bearing. And then this end has that chuck that we saw earlier. So what I want to do is I have the ability to tighten this up. So I'm going to tighten this up, which is going to push everything to this end, which just helps drive the drive spur in tight. And then from there, I can do the turning. Again, I could have completed this whole thing between centers like this, but I will be putting it in my chuck momentarily. I do have a line here. This is going to be a leg. So this is going to be for a daybed. So the side rails are going to come into here. So I'm actually not going to turn above this line. This is going to stay square. And then I'm just turning my leg piece down in this section here, which is about 7 inches. So we'll go ahead and get started. So the first thing I do is I turn, squaring up the top and turning a tenon so that I can mount this in my chuck. In order for me to mount it in my chuck, I want a tenon that's about 2 inches in diameter, but I only need it to be 1/4 of an inch or so long. There's part of the problem with softwood. It's going to chip out a whole lot easier than hardwood would. Oh, this is the top. I'll be able to sand that anyways, so I'll be able to take that out. I do have a bit of a chip here, but part of that's going to be cut away. We'll see that later. So I'm okay. This is the front. So let's go and get this off and back into a chuck. So now I have it mounted in my chuck. It just makes it a little more secure. What I'm going to do, this part here, from here down, this line, is all going to be round. There'll be nothing square from here down. So I'm going to start cutting in on this line until I get a diameter established that gives me a square line the whole way around. And then we'll go from there. You're going to see here that I use various tools. First of all, I start off with my skew chisel. That's the best tool to establish that square line. And then when it comes to removing a lot of material, here I've switched to my bowl gouge. The bowl gouge will remove a lot of material, but especially with the softwood, it does not give me the smoothest surface. A scraper will do a better job at that. But for now, I just want to get things round before I start shaping the actual leg itself. Now that it's round, I'm just taking a pencil and making some marks on the wood where I want my beads to be. And that's just rough at this point. I'll mostly just go by feel and by look as I'm moving along. At this point, I've also switched to a carbide tool. The carbide tool works like a scraper and also gives me good control in cutting the beads and also gives me a fairly smooth surface. You can see near the top, I have two fairly large beads. I'll go back and add some more detail here in a moment. And then the bottom part of the leg, I will taper down because the very bottom is going to have a much smaller diameter. And again here you can see I'm starting to add some detail. Besides the beads, I'm also putting just some details around them, a little base, a little line in between just to separate them. Just some fine detail. Yeah, that's pretty good. Now, you may notice that when you're working these coves, you tend to come in this way and then you turn it over and come in this way. I will say, especially when it's freshly sharpened, you tend to get a burr. So, depending on which way you've sharpened it last, you'll have a burr on one side, not the other. So, that burr actually gives you a much smoother cut. And that's why I was cutting much better when I was coming this way than I was when I turned it over, because then the burr is down. You want the burr facing up, and it gives you a much sharper cutting edge. Now I'm going to begin to start sanding. I won't show all of this detail, but you'll notice here, whenever I'm doing spindle sanding, it works best just to use sheet paper, I find. It allows me to get in around those coves and sand the detail. I can fold the paper over in half, and that allows me to get in on those edges. Because I don't have any fine, sharp, ornate details, I can sand it. And I need to sand it because it's softwood, I'll be honest with you. If it was hardwood, I could get a very smooth surface off the blade, and I could get a nice pointed bead, like a nice pointed bead here. Not a bead, but a transition piece. I could get nice and pointed and sharp. Softwood, I'm not going to be able to do that. So, and I know I'm going to have to sand because I can't get that glass smooth surface on softwood. So I don't have any real fine, ornate edges. So that allows me to take a little bit more, to allow me to sand a little bit more. with this final sanding, this leg is for all intents and purposes finished. Next, I'll move on to the next leg. So what I've done here is I've mounted, exact same, I mounted the second leg in my lathe in my chuck. So now, and I've also off camera rounded it from this point down. If you remember, it has a square portion at the top and then the shape of the leg itself. So the next part is to try and duplicate this pattern onto here. So the easiest way to do that is to put some marks on here where the transition points occur. So basically, in this case, this low point here, this low point here, 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 and here. So those are kind of the transitions. So I'll mark those. Can't quite see that as it spins, so right there. That's one. There. So that represents this point, this point, this point, this point, and this point. So now the easiest thing to do, and I find when I do this, is to take my parting tool and to go into each one of these spots. And what I'm going to do is measure the diameter here at this point, and I'm going to cut down till I get to that diameter. So I'll have these reference lines. This line here, for example, will be at this depth. And then once I get to there, then I basically just cut everything down to that depth. And then I know that my diameter matches at this point, and then it's just a matter of connecting the dots in between. So let's start with this one. So then what I do, because this here represents this, so I'm going to measure the diameter at this point and then see whether or not I'm actually getting close there. So I'm going to leave that. And then what I'm going to do, because I know that this line here, now there is a secondary one here, but I'm just going to basically turn that down to this diameter. Actually, maybe I'll do one final one over here so I get the bottom. As I cut this depth reference mark, it's much easier to see, obviously being here on the end. But you can see I just use my parting tool and whittle it down till it's the right dimension. And I'll take my calipers here in a second and just confirm it. But once I get it down to the final dimension, again, as I've mentioned, what I'll do is just connect those two dots. There, so I'm just going to explain what I have here. I measured the diameter here. I'm close there. I don't want to be right on. I want to be close. And I measured this diameter here, and it matches pretty close to here. So now I'm just going to connect the two dots there, so from here to here. Now I know I've got an extra detail here. Once I get I'm a little bit bigger in diameter anyway, so once I get down to that part, then I'll worry about that, matching that detail. Now I know all I need to do is remove the material that's in between those two spots. I know I'm eventually want to end up to the depth that I have on the end and also to the depth of the groove I made up here. In the meantime, I can generally shape it so I know it'll match with what I'm going to end up with as well. So now I know, because this matches this diameter and this right here matches this, I know I'm relatively close. So now I'm just going to smooth this out a bit, and then I'll add this extra detail here and then refine it a little bit more. So now you can see this here, I can see this a little bit fat here, but now you can see that that's how I duplicate it. And again, you gotta remember these legs are gonna be 8 feet apart, so they don't have to be perfect, although I wanna share how you would do it and the technique that I use, but I'm gonna get pretty close. I'll do a few more measurements here, and but you get the idea. Next I'll do a depth line here, which will match this, and then a depth line here, which will match that, and then I'll work that out as well. I'll come back as I get a little bit more done, but what you're going to see next is just more of the same. There you go. That is pretty similar. I'm going to do some final dimension checks, make sure I'm good there, but generally the shape is there, all the same things. A bead, kind of a band in between, another one. This here, I gotta refine this a bit better. A sharp V-cove, and then a bead, and then the legs. So that's generally the same shape. Again, I'll just do some dimension checks, get it a little bit closer. I can see this one is a little bit fatter, but again, generally it's the same shape. So here's one finished leg installed on the bed. Again, as I mentioned, this is softwood, so it doesn't get as nice a finish as a hardwood. But my daughter wanted to make a day bed to go into her sunroom, and she wanted it out of softwood. She's going to stain it, so that's what the look she was going for. Here's the second leg. You can see that. Again, very similar. So unfortunately, I don't have a picture of the final product installed in the room. My daughter's going to take some time and stain it and install it. She has some more work to do in the sunroom. The other thing is, it's going to be installed between two walls. So the bed is actually the width of the room. So the side pieces you see here will not be visible. The only thing that will be visible will be the white wood that you see on the front and the two legs. The hind legs won't be visible either.